Chapter 7 Adventure of Chevalier Burke in India, extracted from his memoirs. Here was I, therefore, on the streets of that city, the name of which I cannot call to mind, while even then I was so ill acquainted with its situation that I knew not whether to go south or north. The alert being sudden, I had run forth without shoes or stockings. My hat had been struck from my head in the mêlée. My kit was in the hands of the English. I had no companion but the cipaye, no weapon but my sword, and the devil a coin in my pocket. In short, I was for all the world like one of those calendars with whom Mr. Galland has made us acquainted in his elegant tales. These gentlemen, you will remember, were for ever falling in with extraordinary incidents, and I was myself upon the brink of one so astonishing that I protest I cannot explain it to this day. The cipaye was a very honest man. He had served many years with the French colours, and would have let himself be cut to pieces for any of the brave countrymen of Mr. Lally. It is the same fellow, his name has quite escaped me, of whom I have narrated already a surprising instance of generosity of mind, when he found Mr. de Fessac and myself upon the ramparts entirely overcome with liquor, and covered us with straw while the commandant was passing by. I consulted him, therefore, with perfect freedom. It was a fine question what to do, but we decided at last to escalade a garden wall, where we could certainly sleep in the shadow of the trees, and might perhaps find an occasion to get hold of a pair of slippers and a turban. In that part of the city we had only the difficulty of the choice, for it was a quarter consisting entirely of walled gardens, and the lanes which divided them were at that hour of the night deserted. I gave the cipaye a back, and we had soon dropped into a large enclosure full of trees. The place was soaking with the dew, which in that country is exceedingly unwholesome, above all to whites, yet my fatigue was so extreme that I was already half asleep when the cipaye recalled me to my senses. In the far end of the enclosure a bright light had suddenly shone out, and continued to burn steadily among the leaves. It was a circumstance highly unusual in such a place and hour, and in our situation it behoved us to proceed with some timidity. The cipaye was sent to reconnoitre, and pretty soon returned with the intelligence that we had fallen extremely amiss, for the house belonged to a white man, who was in all likelihood English. "Faith," says I, "if there is a white man to be seen, I will have a look at him. For the Lord be praised, there are more sorts than the one." The cipaye led me forward accordingly to a place from which I had a clear view upon the house. It was surrounded with a wide veranda. A lamp, very well trimmed, stood upon the floor of it, and on either side of the lamp there sat a man, cross-legged, after the Oriental manner. Both, besides, were bundled up in muslin like two natives, and yet one of them was not only a white man, but a man very well known to me and the reader, being indeed that very master of Ballantrae of whose gallantry and genius I have had to speak so often. Word had reached me that he had come to the Indies, though we had never met at least, and I heard little of his occupations. But sure, I had no sooner recognised him and found myself in the arms of so old a comrade, than I supposed my tribulations were quite done. I stepped plainly forth into the light of the moon, which shone exceedingly strong, and, hailing Ballantrae by name, made him in a few words master of my grievous situation. He turned, started the least thing in the world, looked me fair in the face while I was speaking, and when I had done addressed himself to his companion in the barbarous native dialect. The second person, who was of an extraordinary delicate appearance, with legs like walking canes, and fingers like the stalk of a tobacco pipe. Note by Mr. Mackellar, plainly Secundra Das, E.M.C.K. Returned to text. Now rose to his feet. "The Sahib," says he, "understands no English language. I understand it myself, and I see you make some small mistake. Oh, which may happen very often, but the Sahib would be glad to know how you come in a garden." "Ballantrae," I cried, "have you the damned impudence to deny me to my face?" Ballantrae never moved a muscle, staring at me like an image in a pagoda. "The Sahib understands no English language," says the native, as glib as before. "He be glad to know how you come in a garden." "Oh, the divil fetch him," says I. "He would be glad to know how I come in a garden, would he? Well now, my dear man, just have the civility to tell the Sahib, with my kind love, that we are two soldiers here whom he never met and never heard of, but the Cipaye is a broth of a boy, and I am a broth of a boy myself, and if we don't get a full meal of meat, and a turban, and slippers, and the value of a gold mohur in small change, as a matter of convenience, bedad, my friend, I could lay my finger on a garden where there is going to be trouble." They carried their comedy so far as to converse a while in Hindustani. And then, says the Hindu, with the same smile, but sighing as if he were tired of the repetition, "The Sahib would be glad to know how you come in a garden." "Is that the way of it?" says I, and laying my hand on my sword hilt, I bade the Cipaye draw. Ballantrae's Hindu, still smiling, pulled out a pistol from his bosom, and though Ballantrae himself never moved a muscle, I knew him well enough to be sure he was prepared. "The Sahib thinks you better go away," says the Hindu. Well, to be plain, it was what I was thinking myself, for the report of a pistol would have been, under Providence, the means of hanging the pair of us. "Tell the Sahib I consider him no gentleman," says I, and turned away with a gesture of contempt. I was not gone 3 steps when the voice of the Hindu called me back. "The Sahib would be glad to know if you are a damn low Irishman," says he, and at the words Ballantrae smiled and bowed very low. "What is that?" says I. "The Sahib say you ask your friend Mackellar," says the Hindu. "The Sahib he cry quits." "Tell the Sahib I will give him a cure for the Scots fiddle when next we meet," cried I. The pair were still smiling as I left. There is little doubt some flaws may be picked in my own behaviour, and when a man, however gallant, appeals to posterity with an account of his exploits, he must almost certainly expect to share the fate of Caesar and Alexander, and to meet with some detractors. But there is one thing that can never be laid at the door of Francis Burke: he never turned his back on a friend. Here follows a passage which the Chevalier Burke has been at the pains to delete before sending me his manuscript. Doubtless it was some very natural complaint of what he supposed to be an indiscretion on my part, though, indeed, I can call none to mind. Perhaps Mr. Henry was less guarded, or it is just possible the master found the means to examine my correspondence, and himself read the letter from Troyes, in revenge for which this cruel jest was perpetrated on Mr. Burke in his extreme necessity. The master, for all his wickedness, was not without some natural affection. I believe he was sincerely attached to Mr. Burke in the beginning, but the thought of treachery dried up the springs of his very shallow friendship, and his detestable nature appeared naked. E. M.C.K. End of chapter 7. Recording by Thomas Copeland.